Got two more speakers here. Let's get back on the program. Okay, so our next speaker is Martin Roche. Hope I'm saying that right. Martin serves as the Director of Services and Delivery for Avinion Incorporated, an international GIS services firm headquartered in Washington, D.C. He has served as ERISA's representative on the GIS Certification Institute Board of Directors since 2012. Martin resides in Orlando, Florida, and holds a master's degree in city and regional planning from Clemson and a Bachelor of Arts from Virginia Tech. Today, Martin will be talking on the importance of the GISP. Martin, take it away.
Thank you, Steve. Let's see if I can get this going.
Sure thing.
We see in the screen?
Not quite yet.
Do something wrong here. Let me see. Share. I got to click share 3 times. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe now.
I see it now.
Okay. All right. Okay. Very good. Thank you. Sorry for that. I always forget when you go from Zoom to Teams, it's multiple clicks on Zoom to get the screen shared. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time to hang around during your lunch break to listen to what I have to say about the GIS Certification Institute and the GISP certification. I'm going to talk a little bit about its history, processes, and sort of future directions, and why I view it as being important to the profession that we all share. By way of background, the GIS Certification Institute began offering the GISP credential in 2003, and we launched the exam in 2015. Talk a little bit about sort of why there was a delay between those two. But the GIS Certification Institute, we are a nonprofit organization that provides you, the GIS community, with a certification program. We are based in the U.S., but we are present worldwide. And the whole concept of GIS professional certification really began in the late 1990s when ERISA, one of our professional organizations, surveyed its membership. And there was a really strong, overwhelming positive response to the notion of having some sort of professional certification for GIS professionals. GISCI is an organization of organizations. So we were initially part of ERISA, the Urban Regional Information Systems Association, and hopefully a lot of you are members of that organization, one of the state or local chapters. But ERISA recognized that for the certification to really have validity in the marketplace, it couldn't just be a ERISA certification, it needed to be an industry-wide certification. So to that end, the Institute was structured and set up with a number of member organizations being represented on the board of directors. And that includes AAG, UCGIS, and NISGIC as well. We've had several other members over the last several years, including GITA, which just recently ceased to be, as well as some other smaller professional organizations that also did not continue as a sort of an ongoing concern, if you will. So the board right now is represented by these 4 organizations. And that's really been a very positive thing for the certification process, is having representatives from the academic world, the practicing geography world, as well as sort of state and local government. So it's really been very helpful to us. Each member organization nominates 2 members to serve, and was noted during my bio, I do represent ERISA on the board, and it has been my sort of pleasure to serve as president of the board for the last several years. We have a full-time executive director who works at the discretion of the board, and we have a small operations staff, which takes care of mailings, processing, exam maintenance, and the like. Certification history began in 2003, but I think sort of the real fundamental question is why have certification at all? And then sort of what's the difference between sort of a professional certification and a license that you may hold for some other activities. So, certification really is a process that's structured for individuals to really demonstrate they have the knowledge, experience, and skills to perform within a specific profession. GIS historically, at least initially when it first came out, was a tool, a technology, but we really feel like it's built itself conceptually into a real profession that requires and demands certification to continue to grow. So when it was first a software tool, and many of you probably started using ARC ARC Info back in the dark ages, or some other GIS, or maybe even in CAD, and realized that over time it's gone from being a technology to being really an industry, and an industry that's supported by professionals. And as professionals have developed in the industry, the need to identify those that sort of set the standard for the rest of the industry is important to ensure that we continue to grow within the industry. Another couple of things about certification that I think are important, at least from the GISCI perspective, is that certification really is designed, professional certification designed to demonstrate you have a commitment to behaviors that enrich the profession. That includes ongoing professional development, that includes mentorship, that includes adherence to a code of ethics. So those things that really make a professional versus a technician. It also requires that the whole notion of establishing certification to help differentiate yourself from other professionals, establish professional credibility, and then of course why bother to certify is we all hope that it increases our earning potential within the marketplace, right? So what's the difference between a certificate and a license? There are thousands of types of certifications that exist across a wide variety of industries. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported in 2019 that 17% of the civilian workforce held some sort of certificate or license. So it's a pretty prevalent thing. There are a couple of certifications that are available to geospatial professionals. ASPRS has a two-tiered, one in remote sensing and mapping science. The USGIF, which is the Geospatial Intelligence Group, mostly within the federal classified space, offers a certification. There are a number of technical certifications. Probably the most prominent in our group anyway is an Esri technical certifications, which I think they have 17 or 20 of them in a variety of things within sort of their technical sphere and their products and concepts. And then of course there is the GIS professional that we offer through the GISCI. So certification really is a way to document and prove that an individual has attained a level of knowledge or achievement that qualifies you within your selected line of work, your selected profession. Whereas a license is proof that you are qualified to do that work. So unlike a certificate, a license is a legal designation that usually have a clear set of requirements for each vocation. So what gets licensed? Well, in the state of Florida, the Department of Business and Professional Regulation offers over 20 different licenses, right? They include architecture, auctioneers, boxing, which I assume is boxing promoters, or cosmetologists, engineers, home inspectors. The list goes on. But largely and historically, those have been folks that have been involved in sort of health and safety kind of issues, and a desire to make sure that within the state that those individuals meet a certain minimum requirement. There in the U.S., in terms of certified GISPs, GIS professionals, we started out with 29 in 2003, and now there's over 10,000. So the number continues to grow as the GIS profession continues to grow, as the acceptance and use of GIS continues to grow. And we're seeing folks coming to the GISCI website at more than 200 a month to register and express an interest in either taking the exam or growing their profession. So we're continuing to see sort of active growth in the interest in the GISP and the interest in certification in GIS overall. Who are these people and where are they coming from? Probably not surprising, the majority, 50%, are from consulting firms. Those organizations that are looking to identify staff and provide credentials for staff that sort of raise the level of perhaps marketability, but also maybe comfort for their customers, that the folks who are involved in these activities really do know what they're doing. Government at all levels is about 35%. Just under 10% are from the academic world, either faculty or staff. We have about 5% or so that are from other organizations, as maybe tribal or other nonprofits, and a very small percentage are students who are registering to take the exam. What's the process to get certified? I would expect that at least several of the folks that are currently listening are certified. So this is really intended for those of you who are not, but so for the initial GISP, there is a portfolio review plus an exam. Fundamental to both the initial certification and recertification is a requirement that you review and sign an ethics statement. We're trying to stress that more and more within the profession to make sure that people understand that we do have an ethical obligation to society, to the profession, and to our employers. And I'd be happy to sort of talk more about that if you have any questions about the importance of that. But it's something we are beginning to stress more and more. You have to submit a portfolio for your initial certification, which just demonstrates that you meet certain requirements for education, experience, and contributions to the profession. And it does require a minimum of 4 years professional experience. And then you have to take an exam. You have to take the exam. You would then be certified for 3 years. When you recertify, you have to, again, as I mentioned, re-sign the ethics statement. And you have to submit an online application for recertification that just shows essentially that you've continued your professional development, professional education, and continue to contribute to the profession. Sort of fundamental to professionalism is sort of the view that you continue to stay abreast of changes within the technology, changes within the industry, but also that you continue to contribute to the profession for helping other folks develop the skills necessary to build and grow the profession. There are costs, of course. The initial application is a $100 one-time fee, another $100 to review your portfolio, $250 to take the exam, $300 if you're in an international location, which I would expect probably doesn't affect anybody on this call. And then there's an annual fee of $95 per year after your first year for your certification. Get a lot of questions on the exam and why do we have an exam and why didn't we start with an exam initially? The fundamental question as to why we didn't start with an exam initially was that developing an exam is a very difficult, lengthy, and costly activity. And you have to have some demonstrated level of, first of all, interest, but second of all, you have to have identified folks who can help you develop that exam. So when we initially started the GISP, didn't feel like we were mature enough to support an exam yet. That changed, and demand for the exam became critical, so it was added. And sort of the fundamental reasons to have the exam where folks really felt that we needed to be able to provide a measurable competency level. So to make sure that we measured all the sort of critical skills, knowledge, and experience that a GIS professional should have, the GISP community viewed an exam as being fundamental to that. We also felt like it provided increased visibility and credibility for the certification. It's building upon our established and successful GISP portfolio review and really enhances that to provide an additional sort of level of scrutiny. We're beginning to see sort of post offering the exam that we're seeing more and more folks who are requiring either a GISP as either preferred or required for some higher level GIS positions, which is gratifying to see. We also thought that the exam would provide an increased opportunity for students to begin their pathway towards professional certification early in their career. The idea initially was that students may have an interest when they're fresh out of a certificate program, a graduate program, or an undergraduate program to take the exam to provide them a sort of an additional competitive advantage, perhaps, when they're out looking for work. To say, yes, I've taken and passed that exam. I am on the track to become a GISP once I have my 4 years worth of experience. That really hasn't happened too much, and I can certainly address that if anybody has any questions about that. We're not seeing a whole lot of students avail themselves of that opportunity, and unfortunately, many that do are not passing. And I'll talk about that in a second. But another reason to have a basic exam, and again, this is sort of a fundamental core technical exam for GISP, is that it can provide the basis for a move toward more specialized certifications. As we move forward and as the GIS community grows, there has been some movement within the industry to request certifications in additional kind of professional areas, perhaps management, perhaps software development, perhaps database management within the sort of GIS realm. So all those things are being sort of investigated actively by the GISCI board at this point. So what's the exam like? Well, it's written by GISPs specifically for the GISP certification. It is expected when you are taking the exam, you have 4 years worth of experience, and that's part of the reason why we're seeing a lower than would be expected passing rate from folks who are fresh out of academic programs, I think. Because the exam focuses on applied knowledge. It isn't simply this term means that, describe what a projection is. It is, the questions are all structured to require sort of an understanding of how to apply that knowledge in a professional setting. The questions are based on the jobs performed by GISPs, and we interview a wide variety of GISPs to understand sort of what tasks are required for them to successfully complete their work on a day-to-day basis. And KSAs, or knowledge, skills, and abilities, we have them divided now into 10 content areas, which I'll talk about in a moment. But in terms of an exam process, we offer 2 exams a year. You can take the exam anytime you want, anytime it's offered, I guess I could say. But so in other words, you don't have to have 4 years experience to take the exam. You don't have to have already submitted a portfolio. You can register and take the exam without any of those things happening. We do offer students the opportunity to take the test anytime they want as well, before they graduate or after they graduate. The only sort of caveat to that is you have a 6-year window from the time you either pass the exam or get an approved portfolio to complete the certification process. So if you are, just coming out of an undergraduate program and planning to go to graduate school, you may want to take the exam at that point. You have 6 years from the time you would pass the exam to complete the requirements for your portfolio. So that would include the 4 years professional experience and the contributions to the profession and education requirements. The exam knowledge areas, as I mentioned, we developed those based upon sort of an interview with the GIS professionals in the community. So the idea there is we did a job analysis that sat down and reviewed sort of what GIS professionals do on a daily basis. We use some academic publications as well. DACMs are developing a curriculum for the GIS community. And we use a number of focus groups to sort of identify those major tasks and major areas that are required to be a GIS professional. The total number of things we identified is over 400. So there's a bunch of stuff in there. We found about 10% of the knowledge areas were relevant to GISPs out of that overall sort of GIST body of knowledge. And 45 were identified for inclusion in the exam. So here are sort of the 10 broad areas that are in the exam. Sort of conceptual foundations of GIS, geospatial data and fundamentals. And these percentages are based upon the percentages that GIS professionals felt define their daily activities. So you can see these 10, they go down to professional practice and systems design and maintenance and applications development are relatively smaller percentage-wise than some of the others. But I think if you sit down and look at sort of what you do on a daily basis as a GIS professional, I think these would cover the vast majority of the things you do on a daily basis or a weekly basis. Those are further broken down into the 45 sort of specific ones. For example, under conceptual foundations, you have to understand datums, coordinate systems, and projections. So, just basic knowledge of Earth geometry, basic geomatics, and its relationship to GIS, sort of fill out those sort of conceptual foundations. I won't read all of this to you. It's all available on the website. But you can see it is fairly detailed, and, were any of us to sit down and try to go through this and make sure that we understood all this, it might be a rather daunting task for us if we hadn't already taken the exam. What is the exam process? We have it is available at official testing centers throughout the US and throughout the world through PSI. It's comprised of 100 scored multiple choice questions or multiple response questions. So all those questions we all loved when we were in school is, is it answer A, B, C, or is A and B, A and C, or all of the above, or none of the above? So those are the sort of way that the questions are asked. The actual test will have between 180 and 190 questions on it. And we get asked very frequently, why are there more? And the answer to that is when we develop new test questions, we have an active process for doing that to keep the exam fresh and to make sure that it's representative of current industry trends and professional practice. Before those questions can be used in a formal testing environment for testing best practices, you have to test them. You have to test the question and make sure that it's accurate, that it's not misleading, that it's worded properly, that not everybody gets it right, not everybody gets it wrong, all those sorts of things. And it's a very sort of detailed statistical analysis to determine whether or not the question can actually be moved to an active test question. This is certification exam best practice. This is the same sort of thing if you ever took the SAT or ACT. I would say probably 25 to 30% of those questions are test questions as well. They're not actually scored to give you your score, but are just asked to be potentially considered in future exams. So you're not only are you getting tested for your sort of competence in the basic core technologies and core practice items, but you're also helping us understand what questions we need to ask in future exams. When you finish the exam, you don't get your results immediately. I know that can be quite frustrating for folks, but right now we've narrowed the sort of time that till you get your response to less than a month. Part of the reason for that is we do a formal review of the exam and the exam questions post-exam to make sure that that everything was properly done, properly coded, so we don't tell people they passed when they actually failed or tell people they failed when they actually passed. So we go through a detailed statistical analysis before we release the results to make sure that everything is valid, everything is correct. How do you get ready for the exam? We don't have a single book or single course that we can point you to, but we do have the exam blueprint, and I think it's important for you to self-assess based upon that exam blueprint to decide what you don't know, what you need to study more, that knowledge gap. I know a bunch, but I may not know anything about one or two of the areas that I'm going to be tested on. So that is some stuff that I may want to learn a little bit more about. We do have an official practice exam, which I think is the next slide. So we do have we do have a practice exam, which is available online as well, that will give you an opportunity to test your abilities based upon actual retired exam questions. So that online practice exam has questions which have been retired for past exams. So it should give you a good idea of where you stand on individual KSAs, but also where you stand overall and stuff. So, we've had a lot of luck here in Florida with folks doing study groups. So hopefully, some of our user groups are putting together study groups now for the next exam. That we find that very helpful for folks to have sort of a support group to help. Just a little more on the practice exam. Won't go into too much detail here, but the key thing is there is a small charge for it because the exam provider charges us. It does give you a score upon completion and gives you a performance report in each of the 10 content areas. So it gives you an idea sort of what you believe, what you know and what you don't know based upon sort of these questions. That's not to say there's going to be a one-to-one correlation. If I pass the practice exam, I'm going to pass the actual exam or vice versa. It is meant as a self-assessment tool. So, use it as that. So what's next with the GIS Certification Institute and the GISP? So we're continuing to work to promote the field of GIS and its professions and its professionals. We are updating the exam and maintaining the exam. We're doing an overhaul every 3 to 4 years, which means we go back out and do that survey where we collect sort of the information from GISPs in terms of what they are doing on a daily basis in the practice of the profession. And we update that exam blueprint and change the percentages accordingly to match sort of what's going on in the real world. We are looking to increase communications with and involvement with the broader geospatial community. We're trying to increase our growth with international professionals as well because we see a real opportunity there. One of the things which is on our agenda for the next probably 24 months or so is to look at the creation of an entry-level exam for prospective GISPs graduating from college. So the idea there is the exam, which it measures sort of applied knowledge at 4 years, may be a little unfair to people who are just coming out of an academic background. So we want to be able to provide them with some opportunity to demonstrate their technical competence, but not to the level of a full professional yet. I'm going to be happy to answer questions about that as well. We are also looking at a couple other things, one of which is, we have continued to monitor legislative issues that may impact our ability to practice as GIS professionals. There have been a number of states which have attempted to limit the practice or the use and application of GIS to surveyors and engineers, not acknowledging that there are, really GIS professionals out there. It is a distinct and separate profession from engineering and surveying. So we are trying to monitor that, stay involved in that, and defend the profession against that and wherever we need to. We're trying to build greater student outreach and engagement, trying to get more younger folks involved in the profession and understanding that what it takes to be a profession and to grow the profession. We'll begin offering within the next few months a designation for retired GISPs. We've reached that point in our evolution where folks have been GISPs for a number of years, have retired, are still interested in maintaining their credential, but are not active in practice. So it's a little more difficult for them to continue to contribute to the profession and demonstrate, continuing experience when they're not working any longer. So we're looking to come up with a way to provide that. One of the other things which isn't listed here, but I will kind of provide as information is we are also looking at restructuring the GISCI board. As I mentioned earlier, the GISCI board right now is made up by 2 representatives from our member organizations, which are our other professional organizations. We have a proposal now before the board, which I anticipate will be approved, that will add a member of the GISP community to the board, at least one, and probably one a year for on a 3-year cycle. The goal there is to try to get some broader interest and activity from GISPs instead of just sending them a $95, a bill for $95 a year for their recertification fees, and beginning to provide sort of some additional services and responsiveness to the community. So sort of closing thoughts, and then we have, I think, a minute or two for questions. Sorry, I'm been a little long-winded today. But we did a survey of folks and said, is the GISP worth it? What should we be focusing our time on? One of the responses was he felt like the money he spent on the GISP would have been better spent on beverages. But we did get some more positive responses to that. And sort of just note that becoming a professional in the GIS world and in any world takes a long-term investment in yourself. And you have to maintain your investment in yourself for continuing to develop professionally and personally. And you need to be active in your profession. You need to go to conferences. You need to participate. And yes, sometimes those conferences, the beer is free. So the money better spent on beverages. Maybe you can get a few free ones. But I think, essentially what we're trying to do is captured by Bill Johnson from Applied Geo, who said in our survey response that having certification reinforces behaviors that enrich the profession. So that's sort of our goal. So I think we have a minute or two for questions, maybe.
Yeah, Martin, I think we have thank you very much. That's some good information. I think we have a couple questions in the chat. Let's see. Ryan is wondering about any discussion on expanding supporting material to help folks succeed in taking the exam.
Indeed, there are discussions about that. There are some study guides and study materials that are available online, which are quite helpful. A number of our member organizations are offering preparatory classes, including ERISA, which offers a day-long workshop. And I would suggest, to try to avail yourself of some of those opportunities if you can. Our goal is to have people succeed in the exam. We want people to take the exam, be prepared for the exam, and pass the exam. Unfortunately, because of the nature of sort of best practice in the certification realm, we can only provide so much information to help people get ready for the test. It would be much like, the SAT can't give you the answers, right? But we can tell you what's on the exam, and we have actively encouraged a number of folks, both within the commercial sector as well as the professional association sector, to develop training materials for that.
Yes, thank you, Martin. To answer Daryl's question, I believe through the TBGIS, a few members were talking about getting a study group together. I don't know if it's going to be in time for the December exam. That's right around the corner, but I know there was a few people that were definitely going to go ahead and want to do that. But my recommendation is go to the TBGIS website, go into the email list, and post that you're interested in starting a study group, and I think you'll get about 3 or 4 people.
I hope so, because it really does help to have a group to help you stay motivated and to bounce ideas off of. And,
yes.
Share knowledge with, because not everybody is strong in each of these 10 areas. And
absolutely. So I think, I know it definitely helped me. I took the PE exam, but obviously a wholly different field. But right. For sure, I think you find the right people, a study group is invaluable.
Yep.
So good luck.
It is.
So thank you, Martin, very much.
You're very welcome. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate your hanging around and your courtesy. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or to Tony Specie, who's the executive director. His contact information is on the GI Certification Institute website.
All right. Thank you, Martin. Last but not least, we are in the home stretch here. We have one more presentation. He's a brave gentleman that's going to do a lunchtime presentation. Not that anybody's thinking about lunch. All right. But our last presenter will be Carl Anderson from New Light Technologies. Carl has been involved in geospatial projects since the late 1970s, contributed to projects at the local, state, and federal government level, supported the Georgia Speleological Survey for 20 plus years. I think I got that somewhat right, and numerous other projects. Over his GIS career, he has been involved in systems for emergency management, addressing, cadastre, taxation, and other administrative government record systems. He has been involved as a contributor and user in open source projects since the early 1990s. He will be talking on update on OSGeoUS and how to get involved. That was a mouthful, Carl. I'll know you do a much better job than I did. Take it away, Carl.
So Randy Hale is going to join me. Has some slides, screen share. All right,
I am.
Randy Hale is from Chattanooga, Tennessee. He is well, there we go.
Can you hear me? Are you out there,
sir.
Carl?
Yes,
okay,
sir,
good.
You're on your own.
Yeah. Wave if you can see me. Anyway,
I'm just here to go present. And can you see the slides?
Yes, sir.
All right, perfect. So want to start off by saying there are a lot of open source organizations. None of them are at arm's length. They all interact with each other, and we're going to discuss a little bit, but there is a US chapter of OSGeo, which is an international organization. And we want to let you know about it a little bit, and then how it can help you with things you're doing, and how you could get involved. Randy, chime in whenever you want.
okay.
OSGeo is a wrapper supporting open source GIS, geospatial projects. Here is the list of projects they're serving goes 40 pages. I pulled something off the first 3 or 4. You should know some of these. I'll just go through them. QGIS is a desktop GIS editing, display, and analysis package. Google OGR is a data analytics package, and all of these pieces of software have licenses. Some of these licenses are very permissive, and those packages tend to also be included in commercial offerings. A lot of commercial GIS offerings have Google OGR in them. PostGIS, some have PostGIS in it. Proj, almost all of them are using the Proj projection library. GeoServer is a online Java-based online mapping server. GeoNode is a data content curation tool. We're going to go through these in a second, a little bit more depth. GeoTools is a package of various tools to help you work with geospatial data. Poodle is a library to work with LiDAR data. GRASS is one of the oldest active geospatial GIS packages. GRASS starts in the early 80s and has had continuous support and development for the whole time. Map server is another version of a web mapping server. OpenLayers is a JavaScript library to put maps on a browser. Orfeo Toolbox is an extended library to do analytics on remote sensing information. Anything else, Randy?
There are a lot of open source projects. I mean, that's just that's a small smidgen of all the stuff that's out there, but that's probably the most popular stuff that you're going to run into.
All of these are OSGeo open source projects. What OSGeo adds, so here is the screenshots of many, or not many, a few of the things we talked. We didn't discuss Degree, which is another implementation, but Degree has some elements that allow you to do 3D very easily within a web mapping environment. All of these packages tend to adhere very strictly to OGC and international geospatial data standards. So if you're looking for something that is pedantically implementing one of the OGC standards, one of these will do that. I believe Degree is the reference implementation for WFS, meaning when OGC is testing the WFS spec, they try it out in the version in Degree to see if it works the way they think it does. So I talked a second about licensing. These are some common licenses.
Carl.
Yes, sir.
I very much apologize for the interruption, but I thought that black box on the lower right corner was just on my screen, but it's not, and it keeps drawing my attention. It is gone. I'm glad I said something.
The chat window was blocking somehow my Zoom decided the chat window was something you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Much better, Carl. I'm sorry for the interruption.
No worries. Please interrupt me at any time. This is a discussion. We want to let you know what OSGeoUS, OSGeo are, a little bit of information about the projects, and help you understand how you can use them. We're not advocating that you should always. There are a lot of great packages built on top of these. There are a lot of great commercial packages as well. Just want to make sure that you have an introduction to them. So these licenses we're listing are, most of them, the MIT, the BSD, and the Apache are all very permissive. Open source software that's licensed under those licenses end up in Esri, they end up in Erdos Imagine, they end up in all sorts of other packages being reused. The GNU licenses and the Eclipse license are more in the viral version of open source licenses, meaning that if you can give out the data, but you can't reuse the software in other packages. But a lot of the software is funded. Esri does fund open source, as other entities do fund open source, so they find a way to make sure that gets reused. If there is under OSGeo a geodata licensing discussion, and it's a really great page. If you're looking to create a license for a local government entity, if you're espousing for a data license within your government, that might be a good place to start to find a way to release the data in a way that would maximize its reuse. Protect your legal interests, but maximize others' ability to use it. OSGeo itself was formed in 2005 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, at something called Map Server User Meetup 05. And it was created to give legal support and funding support for the infrastructure necessary for open source projects. It became clear as projects, say something like PostGIS or Google, something like that that's a very, very large project used by a lot of users, it could have, and they sometimes do have, legal issues, and having legal support makes it easier for the developers to focus on developing and allowing the support system to take care of other issues. OSGeo is also the organizing entity around FOSS4G and FOSS4G North America. Randy, when was the last FOSS4G NA? I believe it was 2019.
Oops, sorry, I'd muted myself. It's 2019 in San Diego.
And it is, so the phosphor-G moves around throughout the world and comes back to the US every few years, whereas phosphor-G-NA has been every year inside of North America, Canada, Mexico, and the United States of America. OSGeoU does have chapters all around the world. You'll find Czechoslovakian, English, Japanese. Sometimes they are created to help with language support for individuals, but also to help foster activities within the geography of the local issue. Provide supporting for the open source projects, get them things like software development licenses necessary to help them track and manage large projects. They do things in addition where OSGeoU has an open science initiative trying to connect into geoscience activities and publish them in an open way. And then Geo4All, which is developing educational material for educators to be able to use GIS is Geo4All, is it K through K all the way up to the end, Randy?
I believe so. Yeah, I think it's K through 12. Or maybe K through all the way through college, I believe. Actually, I think it is. I think it's all the way through college.
And so those are great resources. If you go to the OSGeoU website and look for Geo4All under the community link, there's a lot of great training resources, but educational resources. If you knew someone who said, how do I add geospatial to my lesson plans? That's a great place because that material is created by and reviewed by educators at all levels, including 2-year and 4-year. I do know it. You see GIS uses it, and the 2-year group also use it. So we talked about phosphor-G. Here's the link to the phosphor-G main site, and then the 2021 Buenos Aires was last month, I believe.
Yeah.
And if you go to YouTube, you can find, following this link, and I will share this at the, I'll put this in the chat. Oops, can't share this in the chat right now. I will paste this, and this presentation is, I don't know where to put this, but everybody can reuse this presentation. So this channel is all phosphor-G. So if you go back a number of years, but including this one, every presentation was videotaped so that you can watch the presentations live, even though you were unable to go to Buenos Aires a month ago. A lot of presenters within OSGeoU or phosphor-G also create GitHub sites with the slides and supporting code and material that they were talking about, so that there are online resources to connect to. Randy, did the Tennessee, so Randy led a OSGeoUS activity that was advertised by OSGeoU. Again, nothing is at arm's length here. All these organizations are the same people reaching out to different communities. Did you guys publish to the web yet?
We put the videos that were taken up to YouTube. So I think there's a QGIS Chattanooga channel, I believe. And what I did, I actually did several meetings. Carl helped me with several. We did several up in Knoxville at UTK when it got to be too hard to kind of work around UTK. Their schedule's getting hectic. We moved to Chattanooga and did it, and it's pretty easy to do.
So the discussion is, OSGeoUS doesn't want to own. We want to help people do presentations. We want to help people have more meetings like this GeoFlo. So we just want to let you know we're out there. We support local groups doing things. You can leverage OSGeoUS to advertise events if you're having them. The only issue is there has to be some open source component. So this tags GeoFlo as having open source content. Doesn't take much to meet that barrier. As long as it's not predominantly a vendor-centric conference, it would be fine. So one of the most important bits of OSGeoU, a lot of communities now, is there's a code of conduct you have to agree to, which means, I'm going to summarize it. Randy, correct me. It means don't be a bad person. and don't be a bad person to other people. Have
Yeah.
goodwill and good intent, and everything will be fine. We'll talk in the next slide a little bit about mailing lists. Mailing lists, OSGeo is built on developers who are used to using text-based interfaces. A lot of the real discussion happens on mailing lists. Even though there are some social media venues to talk, all of the official communication and the main communication happens on mailing lists. You can become a member. There is no cost to join OSGeo. There's no cost to join OSGeoUS. There are a number of steps that are difficult. Randy, we discussed, have we talked with Jody about getting that problem fixed of joining?
Oh, we have not. I need to do that. I'll get on that.
When you start to join, you're going to get to a point where someone will email you back, and the president of OSGeo, Jody Garnett, who's in Vancouver, Vancouver, Canada, they need to, because things are open, sometimes people use them for spam, and then they tighten them up, and then they try and open them up again. And they're in one of those phases where they just tightened everything up based on a lot of spam, and now they're trying to reopen it up again. You can, once you join, edit wikis, edit documentation, participate in discussion lists, participate in writing documentation, helping documentation, giving user stories, and other activities to help others understand and use open source software. One of the big advantages to open source software, of course, is you can just download it and try and use it. And there is usually a pretty decent community of people who will help you get started. As you move into production level uses, and those do exist, you might want to lean on some professional support or have some professional backstop. OSGeo can help connect you to a number of places. And I think, Randy, are you still an official QGIS support person or not?
Yeah, actually I am. It's pretty cool. Yeah, I participated enough with the community. I became a commercial vendor for QGIS, which is pretty weird and awesome all at the same time.
Support vendor. You don't sell QGIS. You just help.
No. Yeah. I just provide support for it. That's all.
Apologize for the commercial nature. Anyway, but you can find commercial support if your agency requires it. But you can also learn about things in the way they work if you go. This was, I think there are 70 or 80 email lists. Some are more active than others. I just took a snapshot of them. What you would do is go to the second URL, lists.osgeo.org, mailman list info, and click on a list. The QGIS one, Geo Toolkit, the Google one, click on the ones that are generic. The ones in dev are intended for developers. Nobody will yell at you. Nobody will kick you out, but the conversation may be very technical, where the ones that don't have that tend to be more open and you're lots of places where people ask questions regularly of how do I, all these lists, and answers come back. So the US chapter, which is started in 2019 by Guido.
Yes.
The Fed Geo Day, which is hosted in February, they wanted to have a wrapper to help them kick that off and support it year over year, but they also wanted to find ways to support local entities. There is a local event that's being planned for Charlottesville/Richmond, Virginia, and you could, if you wanted to start to suggest one for Florida, we can help you, but we can't take on we can help you with the planning, but we don't want to and won't help you. We'll help you run it, but we won't help you get it launched. You have to put in some sweat equity on your own to make it work. As this slide deck is talking about advocacy, trying to help people understand what open source is, what resources are available to get involved or understand, and then get them connected to resources that help them use the software in a useful and productive way. So this is the page on OSGeoUS. This is the chapter page. It is down at the bottom, OSGeoUS, which will redirect you to the correct place, Guido Stein. And to join, you put your name at the bottom of this list and join an email list, and you are well connected. Same thing for OSGeo in general. OSGeo has more international focused discussions. So if you're talking US centric events, I would definitely start here. Any other recommendation here, Randy?
No, not really. I mean, typically, like if I want to know about events, OSGeoUS, OSGeo International, and kind of watch those. If I want to know about the software, I join the software lists and, talk to them. And it's pretty nice. I mean, coming back from the old days, I don't know who out there, since we're not in a room together, but remember the Ezreal list from way back when. It was very community oriented. And that's how these email lists feel. You get to know people over them and talk to developers, which is really cool. Instead of filing some weird bug report, you can actually email a developer and talk to them about it. Bug reports help. So,
and that is actually an advantage of using the mailing list to talk to the open source developers. The developers aren't at arm's length. They're not being kept away from you. If you ask a technical question or describe a problem, sometimes they'll say they won't fix it, or that it's a different kind of problem than you understand. But if they will definitely, someone will help you get connected and get started.
Oh yeah.
So that is the presentation. Feel free to contact me. You have to offer yourself up, Randy.
Oh yeah, bug me too. Hassle us with questions. I mean, if you guys want to do an open source meeting down there, it'd be a hoot. It'd be a blast to do. It's just a little bit of sweat equity, but doable.
Just wanted to let you all know about these resources and an update on what OSGeoUS is. I know we're a couple minutes early, but I got to get my lunch before the keynote. Are there any questions?
Hey, Carl, you put everybody to sleep.
I know. Well, I might have a food coma. I don't know. That's what I'm hoping.
They don't want to talk with their mouth full.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So thank you, Carl and Randy. That's some good stuff right there. Open source, non-proprietary, very democratic. So I appreciate you being patient enough to go ahead and present in the last time slot, 12:15 to 12:45. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cool.
All right. So go ahead and unshare your